The first question I wanted to answer was writing with a purpose. And the reason why this fits my final so well is because mainly having a purpose to write this is what made my paper. I wrote about student athletes and how difficult it is for us in reality rather than people thinking that we have it easy. In actual real life situations, people think that student athletes have a lot of resources, but in reality, sometimes we don't have help and we are expected to have lot of um, a lot of like support from others. Um, I wrote about um, how regular students really believe that student athletes have it easy throughout college, and that the only reason why we fail is because like we give up or like we just don't care. But in reality, like it gets tough during season and off season as well. Um, the reason why I chose writing with a purpose is because I am a student athlete myself and going through difficult times and people really giving me that look, well, like, why are you failing or why are you having a difficult time if, you're having your school pay for it? Well, that's not the case. Just because we have our school paid for doesn't mean that we don't have difficulties outside of school that affect us, and the fact of being in season, traveling everywhere, being busy all the time, being tired all the time, and still trying to have a social life at the same time is very difficult. Um, um, of course, we are expected ourselves to have a good grade and be passing all the time and be good role models to other students or to, younger students. They look up to us and they see, okay, like that's what I want to be. I want to be in college and playing ball at the same time or, any other sport. But of course, like, it's hard for us. It's not expected entirely, of course, right? But and I asked one of teammates as well, the student athlete right here, Danielle Isabel. She told me herself that we pretty much practice all day. We don't have time to have a social life or have time to really complete all of our school work in one day. So, I mean, of course, like, that's difficult for us. Unlike regular students, sometimes they they have like so much free time, like they don't know what to do. You know. Well, this is what is giving me a purpose to write this final. Is being what I've been through myself. It is to demonstrate like, hey, like I went through this too, and that's why I'm writing this, because like you can't always believe like, okay, well, they should be taken care of. Well, sometimes we're not, and that's what they don't see. They don't see outside like where we play from or anything like that. The second question I wanted to answer as well is the fitting a genre or the audience of purpose. Of course, that is a main thing to write, to have a meaning for. If you didn't have an audience, then, I mean, who are you really trying to contact, Of course, my audience would be not just student athletes, but, I mean, like professors and anyone school related. Um, Student athletes have been through what I've been through, of course, so that's why I wanted to contact through them and let them say like, hey, like you're not alone, like when you're having difficulties in class and all that kind of stuff. Like, of course, I've been through it too, and of course, like I mentioned that here when I mentioned like what I've been through myself, and you like you have to make a connect with your audience, of course. You have to make them be like, okay, well, this is what I want to see. Like, it will make them, realize, hey, like, okay, like, I know what she's talking about. The reason why I wanted to connect with like professors as well, is because sometimes they will be like, okay, the student athletes, like, of course, taking advantage of their time and all that kind of stuff, just because they're more important, or like something like that. But in reality, like, we don't, and we probably suffer more than anyone else, because we're expected so much and to have such a high reputation of school and on the court as well, and people don't realize that, like, how much pressure it is, and to be able to hit the books and still do good in both, as well as connecting with other students. It's hard, and you feel like your life is hard, but I mean, there are so many other student athletes out there that are going through the same thing, and it kind of gives you a relief, like, okay, maybe I'm not weak. It's just, it's just how life is right now. And that's also why I wanted to answer that question, because that is also a main reason why I wrote this, was to connect to a certain audience so they understand what we are going through as well. And that's why I wanted to answer that one. And the third one, what I wanted to answer, is a purpose for your writing, is like learning from your peers as well. I wouldn't have been able to write this paper without learning from a regular student what they go through, and putting their side of the story and what they believe in, and like what difficulties they go through as well. Because that is a comparison that shows how difficult or less difficult it is for a student athlete. And without their side of the story, I mean, I really wouldn't have a paper whatsoever. So, I learned from my peers because the person I interviewed was Damaris, and she's a regular student, and she actually has a job and is in a sorority. So her time is also taken up. It's not, sport related or something like that. But, I mean, of course, she explained to me how her free time is also limited. So, I mean, we're not alone on that. But she says I don't miss school, because they're both sort of like for school in a way, that she doesn't miss school and it doesn't hold her back or anything like that. She's just always busy. And that was a comparison that I found, that she may go through the same things, only through free time wise, but when it comes to missing school and being busy and having to have a high reputation, it is way different. She also explained to me herself her own personal view of a student athlete and what they go through, and it is in there, the interview, and she goes and explains to me that that we do too much, that we are expected to do a lot more than a regular student, of course, and we are expected to meet this at a certain time and meet that at a certain time, and of course having practice and having to remember about like what we do on the court or something like that, and then having a final. She explained to me also that during high school her friend would like go crazy because they would have like a big paper or something like that, but he was more worried about a game, or something crazy like that. Like there was a game that same day, and like he couldn't stop thinking about it during the test or something like that. And like I mean, it's difficult to rearrange your mind and saying this is more important or that's more important. And that is also why I wanted to mention that learning from peers is also very important to my final, because without learning their side of the story, I mean, there would be a whole story taken away from my paper. People would be like, okay, then what are you comparing to? Like, you're explaining that student athletes go through so much, but like, do regular students go through so much as well? And I'm not saying that they don't. I mean, of course they do, but when it comes to a certain point, we actually have less time on our hands than regular students, especially during season. We are expected so much, and really, I know coaches don't like to say this, but of course our sport is a priority at the moment. But I mean, their reputation, they have to say, well, class is more important. But they wouldn't have their job if we didn't take our job serious, So those were the 3 questions that I wanted to answer. They both related to my paper very well. I wouldn't be able to, with those 3 main subjects, I wouldn't have been able to write those papers. They helped me out a lot because my interviews, that's from my peers. That's without learning from them, I wouldn't have my interviews. I would just be describing my own personal thoughts, and also as well, what it made me learn that if you were to try to get your side on something, you can't just go from your personal view on it. You would need a lot of resources, where you got this information from, where you got this other information from, and how important it is, how reliable it is, and how you can say our secondary sources, without them, how would we know this? And people would question our information, and that's why we need to mention those as well. And that's why having resources is important, and having your own not survey, but your own research in a way that really helps on putting support on your side of this your what you're trying to explain to someone, because they're not just going to be like, okay, well, if you know this, then they wouldn't just be talking, they wouldn't just keep questioning you about it, and you don't want that. You want them to see okay, she got this information by this, and then she got this information by this, and she's supporting it by this. You don't want them to be like, oh, she's just saying this because of that, or something crazy like that, because you want them to be able to rely on what you're saying. And that's why I mentioned quotes and stuff from other student athletes, and I made sure my resources were very dependent, like CNN, of course. If they are talking about it, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's really reliable, because they wouldn't lie, because their reputation's really high. So that's what made me learn to have resources and learn from others, and make sure you're providing your own sources and having a purpose to write. If you don't have a purpose to write, of course, you would just be writing for nothing. I mean, I'm not just gonna put down a few words just for it to be there and have no meaning for it. And that's what I learned from this semester. And I mean, it works pretty well too. It also this final, it made me realize so much that even I found out information that I didn't even know about student athletes and what we go through, and regular students as well, because I mean, of course, I wouldn't know about that and be in their shoes and comparing it and all that.